Good afternoon to you. Mark Sott with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. It is now September the 11th, 2019, and we have a lot to talk about in the tropics. Luckily, nothing to worry about out here in the Central Pacific. We haven't visited this area in a while, so I wanted to take a look and show you. Not much happening out here, but I've seen a lot of talk about how warm the water temperatures are around Hawaii and in the North Pacific as a whole. Not an El Nino. It's not related to the equatorial tropical Pacific warming, but rather the areas in the North Pacific, north of the equator, and very warm water relative to average in and around Hawaii. So we'll be watching this closely over the coming weeks, and now not necessarily months, hopefully, but certainly the coming weeks, that if anything were to develop, especially coming along and then turning with some kind of an approaching trough, something like that we saw with Iniki back in 1992. You never know. But for now, nothing to worry about anywhere near the string of pearls out in the Central Pacific. So moving on to the Atlantic Basin, you know what, we'll come to this in just a moment. Briefly, just want to discuss what's happening in the Eastern Pacific, because this area is starting to become active again. And we do have a couple of systems to watch here, 3 total. And this one probably headed out this way. This one will be a little bit closer to the coast, it looks like. Still, not much of an impetus to get any of these features to turn into the Baja and bring sensible impacts. That means impacts that you can feel or sensible, into the desert Southwest or anything like that, Northwest Mexico. We still have enough high pressure sitting out here to keep these all basically shoved down to the south. That being said, as I alluded to just a moment ago, though, nothing headed towards the direction of Hawaii, at least for the time being. So now we shift our focus to the Atlantic Basin, where we have 2 distinct areas to watch very closely. 95L over here. This is 94L. This is going to soon be 96L, in my humble opinion. And we have a complicated setup going on over the next few days, and the possibility of some impacts here. We have this system now brewing in the southeastern Bahamas. We obviously know what's happening in the aftermath here of Dorian up in the northwest Bahamas. And luckily, on one hand, that's confined to Abaco and those islands around the Abacos, plural, as I call it. Maybe that's a real term, the Abacos. I've heard it called that. And, of course, Grand Bahama and the terrible disaster that struck from Dorian and what's happening in the days since. And you certainly do not need any hurricane activity anywhere near there. Now, unfortunately, mankind, despite what you read on the internet, cannot control such things. And if we could, stuff like Dorian wouldn't happen. All right? It did happen. And we have to be ready to hopefully respond if something major were to come along. What will we do? Try to evacuate the survivors? I don't know. But we do need to look out, especially for those that are giving aid, that it could affect their operations. And so we do have this system down here. 40% chance of development over the next couple of days, and 60% chance there, 6 out of 10 going forward the next 5 days. And we'll look at this closer in a moment. This tropical system, a tropical wave, going to move across the tropical Atlantic fairly quickly, and the modeling now, the GFS and the Euro and others, indicating it starts to come to life as it approaches the Lesser Antilles in about 4 to 5 days. So here are the players on the field, as it were, from the vorticity map. This shows us the areas of energy, and this is the vorticity signature for 95L down in the southeastern Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, north of eastern Cuba. And this is something we need to watch. Now we can see it through this technology, and let's see if it starts to bundle that energy and become more round in its appearance. I've talked about this lots of times. Now that it's showing up and getting a little bit more vigorous, we can track it on a day-to-day basis. And I will talk about this often when I do my little posts on Patreon, and all of those posts are available to the public. And sometimes I post this on Twitter as well. So this is something that we can keep an eye on in near real time. There's the vorticity signature for the system in the Pacific. and there is some energy out there in the tropical Atlantic. Upper level winds are going to be too strong coming this way, so that this probably won't develop, but there's more energy back here, a much larger envelope of energy ready to come out into the deep tropics here and try to come to life in this region down the road. And I'll show you that in just a moment when we get to the look at the global models here. Specifically today, we'll look at the Euro. So a satellite shot here of the Atlantic Basin courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com. Notice the overall increase in convection or thunderstorm activity. We've got some in the Western Gulf. Generally speaking, rather innocuous, not much, it's not even mentioned by the Hurricane Center. Probably just a little surface trough sitting in here, maybe a tropical wave, but no development anticipated. It's not being picked up on any of the model guidance that I can see. This area should go on to develop, but as I mentioned, it'll head on off to the west and west-northwest. No bother to northwest Mexico, and none of that moisture will get up here into the desert southwest. So that's good news there. There's 95L, and there's the thunderstorm activity increasing down in the southeastern Bahamas. Now, for the folks up here in Abaco and Grand Bahama, luckily the worst of the weather is away from there right now, but that might change over time as the general forecast for this from the model guidance is this direction, roughly. Now, it's just a little trough of low pressure right now. We don't even have a closed low. It's not a tropical depression. It's a complicated setup, and it's going to take a little time for it to evolve. So what I want to do is we will look at this back to the vorticity signature again tomorrow, and let's see where this camps out. Does it, indeed move right up the Bahamas, including close enough to the Abacos and Grand Bahama? We'll see about that. And that also has implications for folks in South Florida as well. Going forward into the latter part of the week and into the weekend, a rainy, breezy, periods of heavy rain, in fact, squally, coastal interest, whatever. I mean, this is a big disturbance, no matter what it's called. Right now, it's just an area of interest, or we call it an invest area. 95L is the label that it's given, and that's it. But it does have showers and thunderstorms, and, that could be a problem. So take it seriously, especially if you have boating interests and whatnot, going to the beach, whatever. And then if it does develop, we'll see. We have time to watch it. I don't see any indication that it will rapidly intensify, but you never say never. Something to certainly keep an eye on. There's 94L, but again, it's starting to dwindle. You see the upper level winds cutting across here just by this satellite shot. Strong upper level low. I'd bet there's probably a tropical upper tropospheric trough carved out in here. Very fancy way of saying it's not favorable right now. But this energy that's coming off, and I draw this S shape because it's there, this energy, a very vigorous tropical wave, doesn't have a lot of convection with it, but the energy is there, and that's going to pile up in this area and try to develop, it looks like, somewhere in the vicinity of the Lesser Antilles. Now, that's not a guarantee. This is just what the model guidance is suggesting, the numeric models saying, hey, we got to watch this. All right, real quick, in the Eastern Pacific, this is the area. Go away. This is the area. I still haven't been able to turn that off. It's a lot of fun. It's better than people coming in the office and interrupting me, I guess. This is the area that's trying to develop along this, looks like a monsoon trough almost, this nice area of convergence, lower air pressure, etc. But again, reiterating, no threat to the Baja, northwest Mexico, or to Hawaii. All right, a couple things that are very important going forward. I talked about this yesterday. I'm going to talk about it every day as things progress. The Euro, the ECMWF, the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, a great global model. A lot of people call it the King Euro. I just call it the Euro. It does well. It's not infallible. It makes mistakes or whatever because, hey, it's made by humans. But this is the Madden-Julian Oscillation forecast. And the Madden-Julian Oscillation, or the MJO, is this period of upward motion, generally speaking, in the atmosphere as opposed to sinking motion. When the air rises, you foster divergence in the atmosphere, air spreading out, and it really helps to aid in thunderstorm development over the tropics. And this phase diagram chart is easiest to understand by saying, okay, we know from the past when the MJO is in certain phases, certain things happen, and the opposite. So we know that when it gets into phase 8, 1, and 2 especially, and seemingly 1 and 2 is favored the most, essentially the Western Hemisphere and Africa, when it gets over here, we get hurricanes in the Atlantic, usually. Not always, but it's a big help. All right? So what's happening? Well, right now it's over here. And kind of, weakly amplified. This is what we call the null phase, and here, not much MJO activity. But look, it goes across and really goes gangbusters. Not the strongest I've ever seen, but this is a pretty strong signal nevertheless. So the operational is right down the middle here, this green, and then the different ensemble members create this envelope, if you will, around that. And that's a really strong signal. So that we could be having development from these systems here, this eventually, this in the short term, is before the Madden-Julian oscillation kicks in. All right? So, we are here, and this is the next several days. This goes out to 2 weeks. See? This goes out to the 25th of September. So it's valid the 11th through the 25th. This is down the road a piece. All the stuff that's going to develop, it looks like, coming up, is right in here. And I don't mean to sound alarming, but that's alarming, because we're going to have, it looks like, development before all this sets up. So be ready, seriously. I mean, whatever it takes, certainly keep an eye on things closely, whether you're in the islands, Jamaica, the Caymans, the Bahamas, the Greater Antilles, Puerto Rico, the Lesser Antilles, whatever. The United States, certainly. And then this also for Mexico in the Eastern Pacific, because if you know your geography, Mexico is part of North America and the Western Hemisphere. And it looks like we're really going to head into a busy time coming up. So that being said, let's look at the operational model here. This is the main deterministic model from the European Center, the ECMWF. This is the east coast of North America over here. All right? We'll just kind of generally draw it in. There's the west coast of Africa. And then all this yellow down here, this is the energy that I talk about in the tropics. And this gives us an idea of what to look for. I want you to pay attention to what happens in this area, and then eventually right in here as I go through these frames. What I've done is I've singled them out in their own tabs, their own windows. So this is the current. This is 24 hours out. 48, 72. You see what happens right here off of Florida. And we'll take a close-up look at this in a moment. Also, the energy from 94L kind of dwindles, but then you have this energy coming in. That's the tropical wave leaving Africa now. That's 72 hours. There's 96, 120, and you see what happens. By day 5, the Euro is suggesting a bona fide tropical cyclone, a depression or a storm moving across the peninsula and up into the panhandle. We might have to deal with that. And then it also starts to amplify this system coming into the Lesser Antilles. And, you can go on Tropical Tidbits or other sites and look at the full 10-day Euro if you want to. But why worry yourself? That's so far out in time. Remember Dorian? Come on, of course we remember Dorian. 3 to 4 days out, there was this uncertainty. Will it come close enough to Florida? Is it going to hit Florida? We know, looking at the model guidance, days out, and it even made its way up to the President of the United States. And this is not political at all. It is a fact that even the President and his advisors and so forth, looking at model guidance beyond the 5-day forecast from the National Hurricane Center, created controversy. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So, looking at model guidance, and that's all I'm going to say about anything regarding politics, because you never go near politics unless you're into politics, trust me. But that shows you, look what happened with that and the whole Alabama fiasco. And we look at it as just not the President of the United States. I don't care who the President is. Looking at model guidance, unless the President is Max Mayfield or Dr. Neil Frank, don't look at model guidance going out past 5 days and think that it could be a problem. It's just guidance, okay? So I know people denying that the stuff's out there, pretending that you can't see this stuff. It's out in the wild. You have to rein it in and realize that stuff's far out in time. Many things will change. What you need to think of, and what the President of the United States or the President of a major corporation that has people that work along the coast, or the President of a household, a mom or a dad, you get me? What you should do by looking at long-range guidance is say, it's showing me a symptom that something could be coming. That's all you should think of. It makes you aware. And the only other thing I'll add, doesn't matter who the president is, yes, maybe long-range forecasting could suggest a threat beyond the 5-day forecast on whatever hurricane it is, but discussing it in a public setting is probably not a good idea, no matter who you are. That's why I rarely show you anything beyond 5 days. What's the point, honestly? But I do like, I'll end it with this, then I'm going to come off my box. I do like the fact that the president or anybody else is looking at it and they were at least aware. Understanding it in context is the best course of action. If you're going to look at it, know what you're looking at. You don't go on WebMD and diagnose everything that could possibly be wrong with you without consulting a doctor at some point. There you go. All right, enough of that. So, 5 days out, yes, possible tropical something another. I don't know what it's going to be yet. That's why we watch this. We learn together. And then another tropical something another headed for the islands there that we need to pay close attention to. And we will. It's my job, and I'll help you, guide you throughout this process. And I'm one of many people that can do it. But I'm not the only one out there. I mean, come on. All right, so we zoom in close here. Again, wonderful tools from Levi Cowan at Tropical Tidbits. The southeast sector, if you will, of the Euro. And what we've done is I've already gone to 72 hours. You can get a better idea. Look, even has that look to it. I mean, you can't deny it. I don't mean to laugh. You know me. I'm not disrespecting what could happen here. But when you see that, you go, oh, wow. I mean, that looks like a hurricane symbol. It's not necessarily a hurricane, but that's some energy definitely trying to bundle. And we have to watch this. This is 3 days out. And yes, there could be sensible impacts. Impacts you can feel in the Bahamas where Dorian affected. You folks in South Florida, what should you be thinking? You should be thinking possibility of squally weather, heavy rain, maybe a tropical depression, maybe a tropical storm. I'm going to back up and say it's hurricane season. It's the peak of the season. You should be aware already, and if something comes your way, ready to do something about it. Most of you down there in South Florida who would ever listen or watch my video or Levi's video, or you follow somebody on Twitter that knows what they're talking about, you're dialed in, and I don't worry about you too much. So it's your responsibility to talk to the people that are not dialed in, and if they start coming at you with these rumors, oh man, hurricanes are coming and it's going to be crazy, just calm them down and say, look, it's hurricane season, we got to be ready. There may be something of interest that could impact us. We just don't know how strong or where it's going to be yet. Those are the facts. That's 72. That's 96. It goes across the peninsula. And then finally, maybe it gets out over water a little bit there. We'll have to wait and see. And then it impacts the panhandle and beyond there. We just wait and see. So there's a couple of obvious points here. If this is even closer to the peninsula and comes up like this or whatever, probably not much more than a heavy rain producer. As inclement as that can be, still a big deal, right? Heavy rain. Obviously, if it cuts across, at a shallower angle and has more time over the Gulf and then turns north it could be stronger. What I'm seeing is the European model suggesting, with its output here, that maybe the atmosphere is going to support a fairly significant system, meaning that it is more than just a disorganized area of showers and thunderstorms. That's the bottom line. That's what I'm looking at and seeing. And remember, this is guidance from one run, one model. We have plenty of time. We'll see what happens. I mean, it's not like it's 10 days away out over the open Atlantic. It's in our backyard, so to speak, a lot of us. But it's not doing anything rapidly, so don't worry too much about it. But pay attention and be ready to use common sense. I'm going to use that a lot, that phrase. What do I do? What should I make of this? Well, just use common sense. Don't do anything dumb, and it'll be okay. Even in the worst hurricanes, use common sense and you can at least survive. And that's the bottom line. My goal is to keep you alive by educating you based on the experience that I have had tracking hurricanes for the better part of my life. And professionally, I've done this since I graduated college way back in 1995. So there you go. All right. That's it from me for now. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. I will keep posting updates once in a while to our Patreon site. Remember, I'm aggregating most of our stuff through Patreon, and because I make these posts public, it's just like a blog. You know how people could blog on, Blogger or something.blogspot.com or whatever? Well, I'm doing my blogging under the HurricaneTrack brand through our crowdfunding site, Patreon. And yes, there are benefits for those who become patrons, but most of it's available, no cost at all. And that's what I'm really trying to do, and that's where you can go. All right, so I'll be posting stuff on Patreon. I'll be posting stuff here on Twitter, HurricaneTrack. And, by the way, before I forget, I'm going to be on Carolina Weather Group tonight. All right, looking forward to talking with Scotty and his friends and colleagues there, the producers behind the magic of that show, Carolina Weather Group. Around the 8 o'clock hour, I will tweet the link on HurricaneTrack on Twitter. Carolina Weather Group tonight. I'll be talking about Dorian, our 2018 documentary, and we will talk a little bit about, and I'll make sure we do this sensibly, politicians looking at weather maps and all of that. That is a forum for it because we can do so without it becoming political and no name calling and anything like that. So tune in for a very interesting discussion tonight and my take on some things related to weather, but not you'll see. Tune in. That's all I'll say. All right. Have a good rest of your afternoon. Thanks for listening and watching, well, at least the screencast. I'll be back probably tomorrow. I need to shave and clean up my act a little bit before I scare everybody off. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thank you. I'll see you tonight on Carolina Weather Group. We'll talk again here tomorrow.